I want to ask you first up, all the controversy around Donald Trump, his sort of bravado about how don't let this disease dominate you, perhaps contrasted against Joe Biden, so scared of going out in public, always wearing a mask. What is this debate doing for how the rest of us sort of pick our path?
Well, I think the problem is that both extremes are not the way to go. I mean, being in between a bravado and going overboard and really locking yourself up is, I think, where we need to go. And we need to take into account the risk at the time. In the US and in Europe, there's a lot of community spread. And still in Victoria, there's a moderate amount of community spread as well. But compared to the rest of Australia, no, it's very low. And we need restrictions. We don't need bravado. But we need to be adjustable with our restrictions. It's proportionate to the risk at the time, and that will vary. And this is a problem we're going to have for the next year or two. Yeah,
I mean, I haven't worn a mask in Australia yet, or once when I went to the US consulate when I had to. But when I arrive in the US in a couple of weeks, I'll be wearing a mask a lot and being super, super careful. I mean, people are going to make these choices because they know about the environments they're in. I want to ask you about trends in infection rates and mortality rates around the world, because this is fascinating. If we have a look at the graph here of the latest numbers from the UK, we can see that infections have really kicked up a lot in the last month or so. High levels of daily new infections approaching 13 and 14,000. Yet if you look at daily mortality in the UK across the same period, there's nowhere near the same level of deaths from even higher levels of infections. Now, Peter, is this something that should give us optimism? What is the reason for this?
Well, I think we can get some optimism because I think treatment and people being looked after are better. But it's really a function, I think, of in UK in particular, they missed most of their cases during their first wave. I have relatives in UK who I'm pretty sure had COVID, but they couldn't get a test. And they were young and they recovered.
Well, it's not a matter of us treating the disease better?
Well, the treatment we've got is still not all that flash. I mean, we don't have a magic drug that makes it go away. We do have things that save people or decrease their chance of dying if they're in intensive care. But none of the drugs are dramatic. It's better supportive care, better fluids. We know more about the clotting and stop the clotting. That's a big complication. So, yes, the deaths are lower. But I think it's mainly an artefact related to the age of the people being tested. Singapore, for instance, has a very low death rate, but that's because the majority of people there are migrants in crowded situations who are in their 20s and 30s, who we know have a mortality here and everywhere else of about 1 in 10,000, compared to if you're over the age of 85, where you've got a 1 in 3 chance of dying, particularly if you're in a nursing home. Yeah. So the age of the people getting infected has a big effect. And I think as the problem has gone on, older people are getting infected less often compared to young people, and there's more testing. So that can give us a bias that makes it look like the mortality rate is lower now than it was before. But if you look at Australia overall, our mortality rate has been about 1.5%. It's age dependent. But we have a lot of good testing. We have a lot of testing everywhere, and our mortality rate hasn't changed anywhere near as much as England and America. But remember, it's gone down from 10% to 3%, which is still higher than what we've got.